Now, welcome to our today's class. That is fundamentals of finance. Today's topic is on the cost of capital. On the cost of capital. So when we talk about the cost of capital, is the required rate of return by investors who have provided money or funds to the company. The required rate of return by investors who have provided funds to the company, which in this case is always classified into three. We have number one, what we call the cost of equity. Cost of equity. Number two, the cost of preference shares. Preference shares. And number three is the cost of debentures. The cost of debentures. That is how it is classified. Now, when you talk about the cost of equity, we know when we talk of equity, in this case, are the owner or it's the shareholders' funds. And the cost of equity in this case is also categorized or further classified into two. We have what we call the cost of ordinary shares. This is where we have the cost of ordinary shares and also the cost of retained earnings, which I will talk about here. And for you to get the cost of ordinary shares, it will depend with the type of the ordinary share. We have what we call, in this case, we have what we call the zero dividend growth rate ordinary shares. Growth rate ordinary shares. Now, for the zero dividend growth rate ordinary shares, in this case, those dividend, those shares where the dividend will not grow. Like, for example, what I mean, the dividend that is paid in year one will be the same as the dividend in year one, year two, year three, or year four. There is no growth in the dividend. And therefore, for you to get the cost of the ordinary shares, which is KE, will be the dividend divided by the PO minus protection cost, you multiply by what? 100. Where in that case, where D is the dividend per share, the dividend that is paid, where PO is the current market price, and then the F is the flotation cost. When you talk about flotation cost, it's the cost that we incur when you are issuing the shares. Then B is in case of constant dividend growth rate ordinary shares. Dividend growth rate ordinary shares. Now, for the dividend, the constant dividend growth rate ordinary shares are the shares where the dividend is growing at a particular rate. And therefore, for you to get the KE will be given by DO 1 plus G all over PO minus flotation cost, then you add what? The growth rate. And you multiply by 100. Where in this case, when you take DO in this case is the last dividend. The last dividend. Our G in this case is now the what? Growth rate. The growth rate. So when you take DO 1 plus G, in that case, it normally gives you DO 1 plus G. It will give you the next what? Dividend, which is D1. So next dividend is also the expected dividend. And therefore, in that case also, you may be given the next dividend instead of the last dividend. And when you are given the next dividend, to get the KE will be D1 all over PO minus flotation cost plus the growth rate, then you multiply by 100. Plus the growth rate, then you multiply by 100. Now, we've talked about the growth rate here. There are two methods that are used in order to determine the growth rate. And the growth rate in this case can be determined using, number one, the compounding method. The compounding method. And on the compounding method, this is whereby you take the nth root of d1, dn over do minus 1. In that case, that is how you get the what? The growth rate. dn over do minus 1. Then Roman number 2, for you to get the growth rate, will now be the retention method. And for the retention method, in this case is out of the retained earnings, and to get the growth rate is the retained ratio or retention ratio, you multiply by the KE. And the KE in this case, we are talking about the cost of, that is the return on equity. That is return on equity, the lower in that regard. So that is how you get the growth rate in that case. And that is on the case of the constant, the cost of ordinary shares. Now, drum number 2, on the other category of equity, we have what we call the cost of retained earnings. Retained earnings are just the retained profits. And the retained earnings are internal sources of finance, which is also part of the equity. And therefore, they are also computed the same in this case. However, in this case, they will not incur flotation cost because you don't issue retained earnings. You just retain the profits. And therefore, for you to compute, it will also depend with the type of shares. In case of zero dividend, growth rates, ordinary shares. In case of zero dividend growth rate, ordinary shares, in that case, for you to get the KR now, the cost of retained earnings will be D all over PO. You multiply by what? And the other one is on the constant dividend growth rate ordinary shares. Ordinary shares, in that case, will be given by the KR will be DO 1 plus D all over PO minus, you don't minus rotation cost plus D, then you multiply by 100. Multiply by 100. So in that case, for you, in this regard, you can also get it by taking the KR is equals to the next dividend, PO plus D, then you multiply by 100. And that is on the cost of ordinary shares. Now we have the other one, number 2, on the cost of what? Preference shares. Cost of preference shares. Preference shares. Now on the cost of preference shares are those shares that earn a fixed rate return or just a fixed return security whose benefit is the dividend. And for this one, to get the KP will just be the dividend all over PO minus rotation cost, you multiply by what? 100. That is how you get the cost of preference shares. And the last one is now the cost of debentures. Debentures are also just like what? The loans or the bonds. And therefore, in this case, for you to compute the cost, it will also depend with the type of debenture. There is what we call the irredeemable debentures. And irredeemable debentures are those debentures that do not have a defined maturity period. Tunamaanisha there is no way the company will not be able to buy them what? Back again. And therefore, in that case, for you to get the KD, which is now the cost of debenture, will be the interest 1 minus the taxation all over the value of debenture minus flotation cost, you multiply by what? And IT in this case I've said is the interest. This one I've said T is the tax. And then PD is the current market value or the market price of the debenture. F, you know, is the flotation cost. And that is in case of the irredeemable. Then number two, we have the redeemable debentures. We have the redeemable debentures. Now for the redeemable debentures are those debentures that have a defined maturity period, meaning that there is a time that they are going to mature. And therefore, for you to get the cost of a redeemable debenture, we also call it the yield to maturity. And therefore, it will be the interest, 1 minus the tax, you add the maturity value minus the value of debenture, 1 over n, that is n is the maturity period. Then you take the maturity value plus the value of debenture, 1 over 2, and then you multiply by 100. That is how you get the yield to maturity or the cost of debenture for the redeemable debentures. Whereby, in this case, M is the maturity value, which in that case is also the value. And the VD, we know is the current value of the what? Current market value of debenture. And then we have the N is maturity period. That is now the N. And those are the costs that form the what? The cost of capital, or what the investor wants to be aware. This is now the required rate of return that he needs in each and every part of the capital structure. Now, that we have also what we call the weighted average cost of capital. The weighted average cost of capital. Weighted average cost of capital, we also call it the composite cost of capital, where in this case, weighted average cost of capital, which is also the composite cost of capital. Now, the weighted average cost of capital, this is the average cost of capital that is used in evaluating existing projects. Where in this case, to get the weighted, that is WSEC, is always given by the weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference shares, cost of preference shares, and weight of debenture, cost of debenture. In this case, we don't include the cost of retained earnings because when we are determining the weights, we normally use the market values. And in this case, they are assumed to be included in the cost or the weights of the equity. And therefore, we don't consider the weight of what? The weight of, the retained earnings. We only consider the ordinary shares, preference shares, and the what? The debentures. With that now, can try an example that we can try an example on the same, and try an example on the same. And the example that we'll do is in the sitting of November 2018, question number 2C. November 2018, question 2C. November 2018, question 2C. Now you are required that the following is an extract from the statement of financial position of EPFSI Limited as at 30th June 2018. You have the ordinary shares of the shillings 50 each, reserves 9% preference shares, 14% loans. We have the total long-term funds. Additional information. The ordinary shares are quoted at shillings 80 per share, and ordinary shares are expected or expect a cash dividend of shillings 4 per share. A dividend growth rate at the rate of 12% at the end of every year. The preference shareholders are unredeemable and are quoted at shillings 72 per share. The loans are quoted at VAR, and the corporate tax is 33% per annum. You are required the weighted average cost of capital using the market value. So to get a weighted average cost of capital, as we say, is the weight of ordinary shares, cost of ordinary shares, weight of preference shares, cost of preference shares, and the weight of debentures, cost of what? Debentures or the loan. And in this case, first we need to begin by looking at the what? Their costs, these costs. So I'll begin with looking with the cost of the ordinary shares. The cost of the ordinary shares. And the cost of ordinary shares here, I will begin with the KE, which in this case we know it is DO 1 plus D because it's a constant dividend growth rate all over PO minus flotation cost plus G. Then you multiply by and. But however, in our case, we know this is DO, which is the last dividend that was paid. But in our case, on additional information number 1, ordinary shares expect a cash dividend. What we've been given there is not the next dividend that is supposed to be paid, not the last dividend, meaning that we'll now be able to use the other formula where I say it should be equal to D1, PO minus flotation cost plus G, then you multiply by 100. Where in that case, our next dividend is 4 shillings per share. You divide by the market price of the shares which they are quoted at 80. We don't have flotation cost, and then we add the growth rate. Growth rate in this case is 12%, which is 0.1 what? 0.12. And in that case, you multiply by 100. You multiply by 100, which in that case, you get a value of how much? Which in this case is going to give you a value of 4 over 80. You add 0.12, then you multiply by 100. In that case, it will give you 17 what? 17%. That is the cost of the ordinary shares. The other one is the cost of preference shares. Cost of preference shares, where in this case you say it is given by KP will be D all over PO minus flotation cost to multiply by D is the preference dividend, which is always on the one that on the capital structure. We've been given that 9% of preference shares at shillings 100. It is always the rate you multiply by the VAR value, which is 100, and that will be what? 9. So in that case, it will be 9. They are currently trading at what value? On additional information number 2, they are trading at 72. And then you multiply by, there is no flotation cost, so you multiply by 100. In that case is 9, 5 by 72, then you multiply by 100, which in that case is 12.5%, which is in that case is 12.5%. Then still, we also have the cost of the debentures, which in this case we are talking about the long-term what? Debt, the cost of debenture or the cost of the debt. Now the cost of the debt in this case, we are told that the loans are still quoted at the what? At the FAR. So in this case, we will not be able to use these ones because we don't know the VAR value, and also we don't know the what. They are still we've been told that we don't know the number of or the loan that was given in that regard. And therefore, in this case, for you to get the cost, you normally say the after-tax cost of debt will be equal to before tax cost of debt one minus the taxation. This is now the KD. So what we had before is now the interest rate. And the interest rate in that case was 14%. 1 minus the taxation, which is 0.33. And therefore, in that case, it will be given by 14 multiplied by 0.67, which in that case is just 9.38%. So in that case, that is the cost of the debt. Now, in that case, we also have to get the market values in order to know the what? The weights. The market values in this case are now the current values. And therefore, in that case, we have for the ordinary shares. And to get the current value here, you just take the number of shares, you multiply by the current what? Market price. And to get the number of shares, you just go to the capital structure, you get the total share capital, you divide by the VAR value, which in that case, we will get the what? You get the number of shares, and they are currently trading as how many shillings? 80. So in that case, it will give you how much shillings in thousands. In that case, it will be 5,200. You divide by 80. You divide by 50, then you multiply by 80. That case is 83.20. Still, you do the same for the preference shares. And for the preference shares, it will also be given as on the capital structure is 4,500. So you take 4,500, you divide by 100 to get the number of preference shares. Then you multiply by, they are currently trading at what value? 72. So in that case, you also multiply by 72. So in that case, it is 4,500 divided by 100, multiply by 72, which in that case is 32 what? 40. The loan notes, they are still trading at the VAR, so meaning that they are not going to change, and therefore it will remain what? 5,000. And therefore in that case, you can get the total. The total will be 5,000 plus 3240 plus 320, which in that case is 16,560. Now to get the weight of ordinary shares is this, you divide by that. So for the WSEC will be the weight of what? The weight of ordinary shares, which is 8320, you divide by 16 what? The total market value, 16,560. Plus, you multiply by the cost of the ordinary shares, which we got how much? It was 17 plus the weight of the preference shares, which is 3240. You divide by 16,560. You multiply by The preference shares we got 12, the cost of preference shares was 12.5. And the last one is 5,000. You divide by 16,560. Then you multiply by 9.38. In that case, now you now get the WSEC, which in that case is 8320. You divide by 16,560, multiply by 17 plus 3240, divide by 16,560, multiply by 12.5, and plus 5,000, divide by 16,560, then you multiply by 9.38, which in that case is giving you 13.82%. And that is the WSEC. The WSEC. That is how you compute the WSEC. We can also try another question on the same. And also try another question regards to the same on WSEC. Where in that case we can also try this question of the sitting of November 2017. This question of the sitting of November 2017. November 2017, and that is question number 2C. Now this is what we've been told, that the following extract of the financial statements of position of Mapato Limited shows that the capital structure of the company as at 31st December 2016, and the ordinary share capital we've been given, reserves, shareholders funds, and then we have the 14% debenture. The management of the company considers the above capital structure as optimal, and then the company's earning before interest and tax average to 75 million per annum. And those earnings are expected to be maintained in the future. They are expected to be that. And then the other one is that the ordinary share capital are currently trading at 400 per share, and the market price of the debenture is shillings 525,000 per share. Then the corporate tax rate is 30%, and the company adopts 100% dividend payout ratio. You are required the cost of equity. Cost of equity in this case is just the cost of the what? Ordinary shares. And the cost of ordinary shares, that is Roman 1, the cost of equity, which is just the cost of ordinary shares, the KE. In this case, we have the growth rate. There is no growth rate, meaning that in this case, it is a zero dividend growth rate, which is DOD over PO minus F you multiply by what? That is in the case of zero dividend growth rate ordinary shares. The 0. Yeah, they are just the same in that case. So do we know the dividend? Now we know the earning before interest and tax. In that case, we've been given the earning before interest and tax. And earning before interest and tax in our case here, we've been given a 75 million. And therefore, what we need to less here is the tax. For us to know, first we have to less the interest. Then after lessing the interest, we'll know the earning before tax for us to less the taxation, those also to do the profit that they were having. And therefore, in this case, the interest will be of 14%. 14% of the total debenture, which is 118,500. And therefore, in that case, it is 118,500 multiplied by 14%, which in that case is 16.59 million. Once you less that, that is 75 minus 16.59 million, you get 58.41 million. That is the earning before tax. So we can now less the taxation, and the tax in this case will be given by how much? We've been given is 30%. So you multiply by 30%, which in that case is 17.523. So if you less that, 58.41 minus answer, this one is giving you the earnings after tax is how much? 48.87 million. That is the earnings after tax. But first they have to pay the what? Preference dividend. We want to know the dividend first. So preference dividend, in this case, you also go to the preference shares, and the preference shares, there are no preference shares, but kama ingekuwa less. So meaning that what is available to them is what? This amount of 48.87 million. So we want to know the earning per share. And earning per share is the earning available to them, which is 48.87 million. You divide by the number of shares. And the number of shares in this case, it will be 62.5 million. You divide by 125 million or 1,000, which in that case is giving us 0.54 to get the number of shares. It will be 62.5. You divide by 125, which is 0.5. So if I take 40.0887 divide by answer, the earning per share was 81.774. That is the earning per share. However, in this case, we've been told that the dividend per share, for you to get the dividend per share, is always the earning per share you multiply by what? The dividend payout ratio. So the dividend payout ratio in this case is at the rate of what? 100. So meaning that it's just 81.774. You multiply by 100. And therefore, in that case, is 100%. To just be 81.77 what? That is the dividend per share. And in our case, we want to know the dividend per share. And the dividend per share in this case will the cost of equity, which in that case we said is the dividend, which is 81.774. You divide by the market price. On additional information, number 2 was 400. Then you multiply by 100. You divide by 400, then you multiply by 100. In that case, it is 20.44%. And that is the cost of equity. The cost of equity. So after getting the cost of equity, we can also get the cost of the second one, which is the after-tax cost of debt, the KD. After-tax cost of debt. So for us to get the after-tax, that is Roman 2, after-tax cost of debt, we say that for you to get the after-tax cost of debt in this case is just the KD now. And to get the KD, it will depend with the type of the debenture. And when you check on that case, we've not been given the maturity period of the debenture. And therefore, to get this one, it will just be the interest, 1 minus tax, all over the value of debenture minus what? Protection cost you multiply by 100. Interest is the rate of the var value. And therefore, it will be 14% of the var value, which is what? 500. And the 14% of 500 is 70. That is the interest. So it will be 70. 1 minus taxation, which is 30%, 0.3. Then you divide by the value of the debenture. On additional information number 3, they are trading at 25. No protection cost, then you multiply by 100. And in that case, it will be 70, multiply by 0.7. You divide by 500, then you multiply by 100. which in that case is giving you 9.8%. So we can now look at the market values. And market values, we begin with the ordinary shares. And for the ordinary shares, we said is 62.5 million. That is 62,500,000. You divide by 125,000 to part the shares. And then you multiply by what? Multiply by the market price, which is 400. Get the value. The free franchise shares the same. Free franchise, there were no free franchise, it was only the debentures. So you also have the debenture. You do the same. Debentures on the trial balance was 118.5 million. You divide, they were currently trading at 500, multiply by 525. Therefore, in that case, it's 62.5. Divide by 125, then you multiply by 400. In that case, it's 200. The other one is 118.5. You divide by 500, then you multiply by 525, which in that case is 124.425. So if I add 200, you get the total, which is 324.425 millions. That is the total weight. So we can get the WSCC, which is the weight of equity, cost of equity, and weight of debenture, cost of what? Debenture. Weight of equity will be 200 million. You divide by 324.425. You multiply by the cost, which you got 20.44. Then you add the 124.425. You divide by 324.425. Then you multiply by what? 13, not 13. This one 9.8. So in that case, it will be 200 divided by 324.425 plus you multiply by 20.44 plus 124.425. You divide by 324.025, then you multiply by 9.8, which in that case is 16.35. And that is the cost of the weighted cost of capital. Weighted cost of capital. Then we have the last question, the last area, which is now on the weighted marginal cost of capital. The weighted. So the weight, we have the last area, which is now the weighted marginal cost of capital. Marginal cost of capital. Now for the weighted marginal cost of capital, this is the cost of capital that is used in evaluating new projects. And in this case, we normally use the amount to raise in order to finance such a given project. And therefore, in this case, now we include the what? We include the cost of what? Retained earnings. And to get the WMCC will be the cost of retained earnings, the weight of retained earnings, cost of retained earnings, weight of ordinary shares, cost of ordinary shares, weight of preference shares, cost of preference shares, and the weight of debenture, cost of what? Debentures. And that is how you just get the WMCC. We can as well try a question on the same, which we'll do in the sitting of can try such an example on the WMCC. Try on the WMCC. And in this case, I'm doing the question of May 2017. May 2017. And that is question number 1C. Question 1C of May 2017, question 1C. So from that, we've been told that Ushindi or Ufanishi Limited is considering raising additional shillings 10 million to finance an expansion program. Firm's capital structure, which is considered to be optimal, is given as follows. We have equity, and we have for the debt, and we have for the preference shares. The company expects to raise shillings 2 million from the internal sources. The firm pays a constant ordinary dividend of 2 shillings per share, and this is expected to remain constant for the foreseeable future. Now, the firm will issue new ordinary shares at a current price of 25, which will incur a flotation cost of shillings 5 per share. New irredeemable debentures will be issued at fair value of shillings 100. A flotation cost of 5% of the borrowed value will also be incurred. New preference shares will also be issued at 60. The value of each share is 50 shillings. Flotation cost is shillings 2 per share will be incurred. Corporate tax will be given there, applicable is 30%. You are required the weighted marginal cost of what? The weighted marginal cost of capital. The weighted marginal cost of capital. And the weighted marginal cost of capital, we said is weight of what? The weight of retained earning, cost of retained earning, weight of equity, cost of equity, weight of preference shares, cost of preference shares, and weight of debentures, cost of what? So we'll begin by looking at the costs. We'll begin with the cost of retained earnings. And for the cost of retained earnings, which is KR, in this case, it will depend with the type of the ordinary shares. We've been told that the constant ordinary dividend is just 2. So meaning that this is a what? 0 dividend growth rate ordinary shares. And therefore, we said in that case, you normally take the dividend, you divide by P, you multiply by 100, because they will not incur the what? They don't incur flotation cost. A dividend was 2, and the current market price was on additional information number 1 of the shares was 25. You multiply by 100, which in that case will give you a value of how much? To give you a value of 8%. That is 4 multiplied by 2, which in that case will give you that. We have the second one, which is the cost of ordinary shares. And for the cost of ordinary shares, this is now the KE. It incurs flotation costs, and remember the only difference, we say that this one will less what? Flotation costs. So in that case will be 2 divided by 25 minus, we were told that the flotation cost incurred is 5. So we'll minus 5, whereby that case will also multiply by 100, which in that case it will give you how much? It will be 25, which in that case it will be 10%. Then we also have the cost of preference shares. That one is not changing. KP will be given by D over PO minus flotation cost to multiply by 100. So in that case, for the dividend, we say it is always the rate of the VAR value, and the VAR value was 10, is be 10% of the VAR value to get the dividend, 10% of the VAR value, and the VAR value of preference shares was 50, meaning that it will be 5. So in that case, it will be 5. You divide by the market value of the preference shares on additional information number what? Number 3, they are issued at 60. You minus the flotation cost. A flotation cost is 5% of the what? Is 2. So in that case, you minus 2, then you multiply by 100. So in that case, it is 5. You divide by 58. Then you multiply by 100, which in that case is 8.62. 8.62. Then we have the last one, which is cost of what? Debenture. And the cost of debenture, in this case, is the KD. And remember, we were told is irredeemable. It will be just the interest 1 minus tax, value of debenture minus flotation cost, you multiply by what? 100. Interest is on the VAR value. And the VAR value in this case, the interest on additional information number 3, already we know that on the capital structure, the interest is 8. The VAR value is 100, meaning that interest will be 8. So it will be 8, 1 minus the taxation, which was 30%, so it's 0.3, divided by the value on additional information number 2. They are currently issued at what? They will be issued at VAR value of shillings what? 100. But however, 5% of the shares will also be what? Of the flotation cost, which in that case it will be 8. Remember, you multiply by 100. In that case it will be 8, you multiply by 0.7, divide by 95. Then you multiply by 100, which in that case is 5.89%. With that now, we also look for the amount to raise. Amount to raise. In this case, I've said we are not using the what? The market value. If we raise the amount through the retained earnings, which are the internal what? Retained earnings, which are the internal sources. You will also raise the amount through the ordinary shares. We have the preference shares. And then we have also the what? The debentures. The debentures. So for the preference shares, or for the total amount that you want to raise, we know. You want to raise an amount, additional capital of shillings what? 10 million. That is 10 million. That is what he wants to raise. But already we've been told that in this case, already there are, after the capital structure, you expect to raise 2 million from the internal sources. So these 2 million internal source, the internal source is only the what? The retained earnings. So we want to know the rest at a raise AJ. So we've been given the capital structure there, whereby 10% will be from the preference shares. So we just take 10% of 10 million, whereby in that case it will raise 1 million. For the debentures again, it will also be 30%. So you also take 30% of what? 10 million, which in that case will be 3 million. And then what is remaining, you will be raise it through the what? The ordinary share capital, which in this case you are given the equity. The equity was 60%. So it will be 60% of how much? The 60% of the 10 million, which is 6 million, but however, 2 million has been what? Raised out of what? The retained earnings. When we talk of equity, it's just both the what? The retained earnings and ordinary shares. But already has raised 2 million from the what? Retained earnings, meaning that this one will be 60% of that for you to get for the equity, but already has raised how much? He has already raised 4 million in that regard. So in that case, here it will be 4 million. When you add all of them, they will just give you 10 million. And therefore, we can now get the WMCC. And WMCC will be the weight of the retained earnings, which is 2. You divide by 10, you multiply by the cost of retained earnings, which we got 8, plus the weight of the ordinary shares, 4 million, divide by 10, multiply by the cost of ordinary shares, which is 10, plus the weight of preference shares, which is 1, you divide by 10, you multiply by what? The cost of preference shares, the preference shares cost was 8.6 what? 2, then plus the weight of debenture 3 million over 10, you multiply by the cost of debenture, which was 5.89. 5.89. And in that case, itakupea ngapi? Just be 2 over 10 multiplied by 8 plus 4 over 10 multiplied by 10 plus 1 over 10 multiplied by 8.62 plus 3 over 10 you multiply by 5.89. In that case, it's just giving you 7.9345%. And that is how you get the WMCC. So this is what you do as assignment. This is what you do as assignment. You do as assignment. So you'll you do the question in the sitting of November 2016, question 3C. November 2016, question 3C. Also do the other question is in the sitting of, that question is in the sitting of September 2015. September 2015. Question 1C, and May 2019. May 2019, question number 4C. Those are the ones that you do as an assignment, and I will continue from there.